There's a silence between India and China that speaks louder than any war. It's not the silence of fear, it's the silence of strategy. Because, sometimes, the most powerful nations don't raise their voices, they just step back and watch the truth unfold. People often wonder, why does India keep its distance from China? Why not friendship? Why not alliance? The answer is deeper than politics. It's about history, psychology, and moral boundaries that can't be crossed without losing your soul as a nation. India knows that trust without truth is suicide. History has proven this again and again. Nations that confuse diplomacy with blind faith eventually kneel to betrayal. India learned this lesson the hard way, from treaties that were broken, from promises that were never meant to be kept, and from the echo of 1962, when friendship was used as a weapon. You don't forget that kind of wound. You study it, you build around it, you grow wiser because of it. The world often looks at India's caution as hesitation, but it's not hesitation, it's memory. It's the memory of betrayal disguised as cooperation. India knows that behind every smile in politics, there's a calculation, and in the case of China, that calculation has never included equality, only dominance. The handshake may look warm, but the intent hides behind cold eyes. India sees this pattern clearly. It knows that nations that don't respect truth, sooner or later, burn those who trusted them. Look at the global stage, trade deals, regional conflicts, territorial disputes. Every move reveals a hunger for control, not coexistence. India refuses to dance to that tune. It won't sell its integrity for temporary peace, because peace without honesty is just a pause before the next betrayal. This is not paranoia. This is awareness. India doesn't build friendships on words, it builds them on proof. It doesn't fall for flattery, it reads patterns, and the pattern is unmistakable. Power without morality leads to chaos. That's why India stands apart, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom, because to walk with someone who bends truth is to invite corruption into your soul. India's restraint is not weakness, it's an act of moral rebellion. While the world rushes into alliances blinded by profit, India chooses principle. That choice costs something: isolation, criticism, misunderstanding, but that's the price of dignity. It's easy to shake hands. It's harder to say no when the world expects you to comply. But India knows that a nation that forgets truth for convenience becomes a nation without a spine. The real test of strength isn't in aggression, it's in the ability to walk away when something feels wrong, even if it looks rewarding. India walks away not because it's afraid of China, but because it refuses to play a dishonest game. It refuses to build a bridge over lies. So when you see India keeping its distance, don't mistake it for fear, it's clarity. It's the wisdom of a civilization that understands one eternal law of power, that trust built on deceit is the beginning of destruction. And India will not destroy itself for anyone's approval. It chooses truth, even when truth costs more than lies ever could. That's not distance, that's survival with honor, that's strength with a conscience. That's India. China seeks power, India seeks purpose. That's the difference that divides them, not geography, not ideology, but intention. Power and purpose may look similar from a distance, both drive nations to move forward, but they come from entirely different souls. Power wants control, purpose wants meaning, power dominates others, purpose elevates them, and that's where India and China part ways. China's vision of greatness is built on fear, the kind that demands obedience, the kind that silences every voice that questions it. Its growth is massive, undeniable, but hollow at its core because it's driven by dominance, not direction. The moment power becomes the goal itself, it loses its humanity. You can build cities, armies, and machines, but if your foundation is fear, your empire is built on sand. India saw this pattern in history's blood. soaked pages, empires rise, intimidate, conquer, and collapse under their own weight. India, on the other hand, doesn't chase power for power's sake. It doesn't want to rule the world, it wants to guide it through ideas, through balance, through moral strength. Its history is not written in conquest, but in contribution. From zero to yoga, from philosophy to medicine, India's influence was never forced, it was earned. That's what purpose looks like: influence without invasion. Power makes others bow, purpose makes others listen. That's why India's rise feels different. It doesn't threaten, it inspires. It doesn't spread through fear, it spreads through wisdom. But that's also why India and China can never truly walk the same path. One believes control creates order, the other believes consciousness creates order. And when these two visions meet, they can't merge, they can only collide. China's pursuit of power makes it restless, always competing, always expanding, never content. It's the hunger that can never be satisfied, because when power is your god, you must keep feeding it, or it devours you. India's pursuit of purpose, on the other hand, gives it patience. It knows that true influence doesn't come from control, it comes from character. You don't have to dominate others to be powerful, you only have to master yourself. That's why India's strength feels silent but unshakable. This is the moral frontier where India draws the line. The moment power becomes more important than people, progress turns to poison. India understands that. It knows that a civilization's greatness isn't measured by how many countries it can bend, but how many souls it can awaken. That's why India doesn't imitate China's methods, even if they seem effective, because effectiveness without ethics is just refined cruelty. So when you see India holding back, refusing to compete in China's race for global dominance, understand this: India isn't behind. It's beyond, because power fades, but purpose endures. Empires built on fear will tremble the moment the fear breaks. But a nation built on purpose that can last for centuries, that's the real strength of India. It doesn't conquer land. It conquers minds. And in the long game of civilization, that's what truly changes the world. Distance is not weakness, it's discipline. In a world obsessed with speed, dominance, and constant engagement, stepping back is seen as surrender. But India understands something the world often forgets: restraint is not the absence of power, it's the control of it. The tiger that doesn't attack every movement in the jungle isn't afraid, it's aware. It knows when to move, when to watch, and when to strike. That's the discipline of wisdom, not the fear of confrontation. India's distance from China is not born from hesitation, but from precision. It's the art of not reacting when the reaction is what the opponent desires, because China's strategy thrives on provocation, border tensions, economic pressures, psychological games. The goal is not always war. Sometimes the goal is to make you lose your balance, to make you speak, act, or retaliate too soon. But India doesn't fall for that trap. It doesn't respond out of emotion, it responds out of calculation. That's what discipline looks like when it's applied on a national scale. Weak nations react, strong nations reflect. And India reflects deeply. It measures every consequence before making a move, because one wrong step in geopolitics can cost decades of progress. This restraint often frustrates outsiders who mistake silence for surrender, but silence is India's sharpest weapon, because every move China makes is visible, predictable, and loud, while India's moves are quiet, deliberate, and strategic. You never see the roots of a tree growing, but they're always working, deepening, strengthening, preparing. That's India's approach. Distance is also a moral choice. India refuses to engage in power games that compromise its values. It knows that to mirror aggression with aggression is to lose your identity in the process. The world doesn't need another empire fighting for control. It needs a nation strong enough to lead without hatred. India chooses that harder path. It could easily match threats with threats, but it knows that real strength lies in self-command. That's the power of discipline, the ability to choose peace not out of weakness, but out of mastery. This distance is also a mirror that exposes China's insecurity. Because dominance needs validation, it feeds on attention. And when India refuses to give that attention, it disrupts the entire game. Silence becomes defiance. Distance becomes dominance. India wins by not playing the game the way it's designed. That's the brilliance of restraint. It turns patience into power. In the chaos of global politics, India's discipline stands out as rare, almost rebellious. It sends a message: we will not be provoked into losing our principles. Because the moment you let your enemy decide your pace, you've already lost the war of control. India refuses that defeat. So yes, India keeps its distance not because it's unsure, but because it's sure of itself. Because strength without discipline is chaos, and discipline without strength is slavery. India holds both, and that balance makes it untouchable. Distance isn't withdrawal, it's wisdom wearing armor. And that's what keeps India standing tall while others fall to their own impatience. When two civilizations rise together, one must choose conscience over competition. Because when greatness meets greatness, the true battle isn't fought on the border, it's fought in the soul. India and China are not just nations. They're two ancient consciousnesses, two civilizations carrying thousands of years of wisdom, trauma, and ambition. Both remember empires, both remember humiliation, both want redemption, but the way they seek it defines their destiny. China wants dominance, India wants dignity. One reaches outward to control, the other looks inward to evolve. The rise of two giants creates tension not because they hate each other, but because their purposes collide. China's rise is mechanical, rapid, precise, and relentless. It's the product of an obsession with order, production, and expansion. But order without empathy becomes oppression. India's rise is spiritual, chaotic, diverse, and deeply human. It accepts imperfection as the price of freedom. That's why these two civilizations, though powerful, can never walk hand in hand. Because when one worships power and the other worships principle, their paths can only diverge. India has made its choice. It refuses to lose its conscience in the race for dominance. It refuses to measure greatness by GDP, missiles, or global influence alone. Because what is the point of power if you lose your humanity trying to gain it? That's the question India silently asks every nation rushing toward unchecked expansion. The world calls it slow progress, but in truth it's moral progress, because speed without direction leads to destruction. India's conscience is its compass, and make no mistake, conscience is not softness, it's strength of the highest order. It's the strength to say no when every other nation says yes. It's the ability to walk the moral road even when it's lonely. China plays the game of fear. India plays the game of faith. Fear multiplies fast but dies young. Faith grows slowly but lasts forever. That's why India doesn't copy China's path. It's building one that history hasn't seen yet. A civilization that rises without crushing others. Every great power faces this test to choose between conscience and competition. Rome failed it, so did the British Empire. Because when competition becomes obsession, conscience gets buried under conquest. India refuses to repeat that mistake. It knows that the world doesn't need another ruler. It needs a reminder that greatness without goodness is just a mask for insecurity. So when India keeps its distance, it's not a retreat, it's a declaration that moral strength is not negotiable, a declaration that no amount of trade or diplomacy can justify betraying your inner truth. The true measure of a nation's power is how much conscience it can carry without breaking. India carries that weight with grace. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't chase control. It chases clarity, the clarity to rise without becoming what it once resisted. That's why India stands alone, not isolated, but illuminated, because in a world obsessed with winning, India dares to do something far greater to remain good. India's silence is its loudest warning to the world. In an age where every nation shouts for attention, India chooses to whisper, and that whisper carries more power than the roar of any army. Because silence, when it comes from strength, is not absence, it's control. It's the moment before the storm. It's the signal that a nation is watching, calculating, and preparing, not reacting. The world misreads this silence as indifference, but India's quiet is never empty. It's deliberate, it's disciplined, it's dangerous in the most strategic way possible. When India stays silent about China, it's not because it doesn't see what's happening, it's because it sees too much. It sees beyond the noise of threats, beyond the headlines of conflict, beyond the temporary gains of aggression. It sees the game in its entirety. It knows that the one who speaks first often reveals their fear first. And India refuses to play that game. Silence, for India, is not withdrawal, it's observation sharpened into a weapon. Because only the calm mind can see what chaos tries to hide. There's a deep wisdom in that silence, a message the world is only beginning to understand. India knows that every empire built on intimidation eventually collapses under the weight of its own noise. Those who scream for dominance betray their insecurity. Those who stay quiet project inevitability. China's voice may echo across trade routes and global summits, but India's silence creates curiosity, tension, and respect because silence is unpredictable. You can counter a speech, but you can't counter silence. You can't predict what a still mind will do next. That's what makes India's approach unsettling to its rivals, because it refuses to give them the satisfaction of an emotional response. Every provocation at the border, every diplomatic maneuver, met with strategic patience. That patience is India's most underestimated weapon. It builds pressure without explosion, clarity without chaos. Silence becomes power when it is rooted in purpose. And India's purpose is not to win headlines, it's to win history. But don't mistake this silence for passivity. India's quiet confidence is backed by preparation. Every innovation, every alliance, every development in defense and technology, it's all happening under that silence. Like the deep rumble beneath a volcano that hasn't erupted yet, when India chooses to speak, it will speak through action, not argument. Because real power doesn't announce itself, it arrives. This is India's warning to the world, a moral, strategic, and psychological signal. A warning that says, we are not asleep, we are awake and patient. It's the kind of silence that unsettles the ambitious and empowers the wise. The kind that says, we don't need to prove our power to know we have it. That's the paradox of India's silence. It intimidates without aggression, commands respect without declaration, and wins battles without blood. It's the sound of ancient wisdom meeting modern strength, the sound of a civilization that no longer needs to shout, because its very existence is its statement. India's silence is not weakness. It's the calm heartbeat of a nation that knows when the world finally hears it speak, it won't be noise. It will be truth.